welcome again to the Levelin Up podcast with Brigham Blackham. We have an amazing guest today, and we have an awesome opportunity to talk with Annalise Keck. She's someone that I have known for about a year and a half, 2 years, and she's really an amazing fix and flip. I want to call her an artist, not just an investor, because she knows exactly what it takes to add value, and she's going to add a ton of value today. Now, we have a simple little topic today that just blew my mind when I was talking with Annalise about it. So here it is. Dive into your beliefs or risk being controlled by them. So let's start off, Annalise. Let us know a little bit more about you, your background, and help us understand why we need to listen to you, because you're so awesome. Go ahead, come off mute and share your experience.
Hi, so thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I've been in real estate since I first joined when I was 18. I was actually raised in it. I'm a third generation real estate investor.
Nice.
Real estate has absolutely changed my life. Fix and flip is my bread and butter. I absolutely adore them. And thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us, where are you from? Because I know everybody else needs to know, because they're like, wait a second, is there a hint of an accent? Yes, it's amazing.
I am from
Woo!
Canada, Windsor, Ontario to be exact. And yes, Canadians do apologize as much as we say. Like we are known for it.
Oh, you can be unapologetic here, though. We love you. We're so grateful to have you. Our good friends from the white north up there. So great. Now, today we're going to dive in and talk about some self-limiting beliefs. Uh, First off, tell us a little bit about why this topic is so important to you, and then after we set that context, we'll give you some great content, and we'll start talking a little bit more in depth. But why is this such a passion of yours to talk about how to squash self-limiting beliefs?
I'm a big believer you can only grow to the extent you want to be vulnerable with yourself.
Mm,
And if you aren't willing to be vulnerable 100% on where you're at, how can you grow to the level of your full potential if you're not willing to go there? That that's a big that's a big belief for me,
yeah,
and that has gotten me through a lot of trials and success in my business and personal life.
yeah, that's phenomenal. So because you're like, you know what, I want to make sure that my self-limiting beliefs are going to be ripped away so I can start to continue to grow. Uh, let's let's first dive in. I'm using this term intentionally. Dive in with some fun concepts here. Here's the first one. Let me make sure I've got this pulled up here so you can see it. But I've got just a handful of slides that might be helpful. All right, wait for it. Wait for it. It's taking a second to pull up. Sometimes
Okay.
it just does that. There we are. Okay, I'm gonna hit present. Wait for it. There it is. Okay. All right. Now I'm gonna hit share because it takes a little bit for your computer to warm up. But there you
Okay,
go.
sometimes
Okay,
I
this
love technology.
I love this. This very first idea is to descend. Now,
Mm.
you're talking about getting rid of self-limiting beliefs. If we don't recognize we even have them, if we're not vulnerable enough to say, you know what, I'm not perfect, then then we won't even get into them. So let's talk about this idea of descending into those beliefs, just like a diver descends into the water. Go ahead.
So for me, when I first think of a limiting belief system, it's like I like to think of where is this coming from? Um, what exactly is it? And for example, let I'll give you an example. When I was 13, they told me I had a 98% chance of never outgrowing my seizures. That's 2% chance. So um like that can very much dictate how things will go on later. And I can go more into this as we go through the dive principles, but that whole concept applied to it absolutely changed my life in that regard.
So whenever you have a belief, guys, we're going to generalize this so that we can get some great patterns here. whenever you are descending into a belief, you have to recognize what it actually is. And if you're not in there and figuring out what it is, exploring and actually like looking through, then you are going to get stuck in that belief. You may even feel like it's something that's holding you back uh, for a long time if you're not willing to descend and really dive deep into what that belief is. So, as we talk about this diving deep and descending into that belief, talk about this first step a little bit more, Annalise. Let us know why this is really the first step, why it's so important to analyze that belief for what it is and the story that it's creating in your life and those decisions. But
So I first think of is like, am I gonna allow this to control once again, like you said, control my current situation and my future? And or am I gonna dig deep, descend into the problem, explore where is this coming from and how can it affect my future if you don't take care of that root problem first and descend into it, just take it on head on first.
yeah. So when you say
It's
descend into this, because I think that's such a great word to
mm,
to start analyzing your beliefs, what what comes to mind? Do you have a story that you're like, this is how I started discovering that this would be helpful for me to eliminate some of those beliefs?
yeah, 100%. So like I mentioned before, when I was 13, they told me I had a 98% chance of never outgrowing my seizures.
Wow.
And that my life would be dictated when I would have my next seizure. So that's a 2% chance of like getting seizures under control. Um, and what we ended up doing is we first looked more into the problem, understanding the situation. Um, and I mean, my Opa was actually the one, my grandfather, who said, "Nah, you can do this. You got it." Like, he was like, "If I can come from Europe and start from nothing and become a real estate investor, you with a disability, you can do this." And he was an absolute firecracker with that and was the person who got me really into this. So as I investigated further, we tried different medications. It was not easy. We went through about 40 of them over the course of 6 years, but visualizing what between investigating then visualizing what my future could be, if it was between, well, driving and what would my life look like if it wasn't controlled? Like, what would my businesses look like? Actually, this was the reason I got into real estate and business to begin with, was because of epilepsy. And then it took 6 years of different trials and medications and just other alternative medications, because sometimes you have to think outside the box.
Yeah.
But I was able to emerge from that and get my license. At the end of it, I had a successful business, and um, I was able to use that to fund my first real estate deal, which was absolutely incredible. So I had my first real estate deal at 18, and through that, using those principles, I was able to make the impossible become possible. And it was absolutely incredible. And that's why this principle is so important to me, because they told me I would live off of disability my entire life and I would never be able to work a regular 9 to 5, never be able to drive. But I kind of took the 2% chance and ran with it. I mean, what's the worst thing going to happen if I don't try? Then I end up on without my driver's license or disability or whatnot. So
Yeah. Oh my goodness. What an amazing story. This is why this is so important, guys. Even if you only have a 2% chance, that's somebody else's opinion. That's their belief. If you think there's even a shadow of a doubt that you won't be successful, like it can dictate what you do. But if you're like, I have a 2% chance, so you're saying I have a chance. It reminds me of Dumb and Dumber. 1 in a million? Awesome. I can do this. You're like, 2%, easy. I can beat that. And you went that final
mm,
percent, and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna make this a challenge to overcome rather than a death sentence. Man, my goodness,
mm,
what a great mentality. And you said your opa, that's what you call your grandpa, was that right?
yeah,
That's such
my
a cute word. I love
grandfather.
it.
Yeah.
Your opa or your grandpa sometimes when we're descending, we don't want to do it alone.
Mm,
I think that's a really helpful principle. And you brought it up, and I was like, man, law of association, it comes all the time. When you're around
100%.
the right people, they can either say, hey, you have 98% chance of not making this, like your doctor said, or you can say, you have a 2% chance. Let's hit that and go after it. So good. Hang around people like that that give you the benefit of the doubt. Okay, this next section I think is really helpful as we're talking about these principles because we don't want to just talk about the principle. We want to give you uh, some actionable steps. So after you descend, we want to make sure that we investigate. So let's talk about investigation. Why is this so essential in business to be able to know how to investigate, how to run your numbers, how to go and underwrite deals? What is this investigation principle specifically in the business and eliminating self-limiting beliefs idea? Go ahead.
So with business, it's so important to know what all of your options are. If it's increasing sales through Google AdWords, Facebook marketing, whatever, Facebook ad, yeah, through whatever. Or maybe there's someone who you know who's a rock star at Google AdWords. It's so important to investigate those options. Maybe there's a book you need to read to understand what you need to investigate further to take your business from this level to the next level to go that final percent.
Yeah.
um, and with self-limiting belief systems, I almost look at it as it's like a computer code. If your computer code is not up to date, that system is not going to function properly. And it's the same thing in business. And it's what your subconscious reacts to events a certain way. And if you continue and if you don't reprogram it, it will affect every area of your life. And that is what I found. So when you have to go investigate and go into that deeper, it's so important if it's like maybe you need to rewire some stuff in therapy because you went through some stuff. Or maybe you just need a good workout regimen or whatever. Or maybe you need to hop on a call with an associate and just brainstorm and investigate on how to increase your sales, something like that. Or maybe you're stuck on a fix and flip. Well, you know what? We know a ton of real estate investors who will gladly hop on a call and brainstorm a mastermind. Like it's like, I don't know which tile to use. Well, it's what are the comps? What's selling in that area for X amount that I can aim for and maximize my budget, I think is a good way. I think it's asking the questions I find is key, and asking the difficult ones I find is key in the investigation part and being open-minded to it.
I love that. So if I can take these ideas you just shared and simplify them for a moment, it's not just stay in your room, hunker down and say, well, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. You actually have to go out there, talk with other people. You have to recognize comparables in your market. It's like,
Mm,
how do I maximize this, but not overdo it and not underdo it? You have
mm,
to have your eyes open in business because if we're not changing, we're not willing to investigate what actually is working in the marketplace, then we can miss a lot of opportunity. So don't do it alone. I think that was a great point. Your Opa, he said, hey, you're not alone in this. Even if it's 2% chance, we're gonna take that chance and
yeah.
make it happen. And then as you're investigating, I think this is a principle that we can talk about. Sometimes we have this idea of you have your hand closed. My friend Greg Kimball showed me this. I love it. If you are closed while you're investigating, you're like, ooh, where is the information? And you just are closed off to it, even if the information,
Mm,
oh, great, and you can't really grab it very well with closed hands. But if you're open to that information and you have an open hand, not only can that information come to you, you can also give information back. And there's an exchange there. And when you're investigating, what if you asking those questions helped somebody else as well?
mm,
Sometimes as you're asking questions as a new person or an older person, as you're asking for help, that is something that it's kind of like that Benjamin Franklin principle. When you ask someone for help, even if it's your enemy, they will start to be endeared to you. And even if you have diametrically opposed views, like completely opposites, you can start to make a connection. Even if you're from Canada and I'm from the United States, we ask each other for help, and suddenly we make a connection. I love it. But we need one.
100%.
I love it. So, any final thoughts on this idea of investigation? Because I love this principle and how you're going after it.
Really sums it up in that regard. I think, yeah, I think being open and going, if it's going to new rooms for networking or whatever, like Greg Kimball always says, get in the room. That's key. And investigate what opportunities are available to you, I think,
Mm.
is go for it.
Yeah. What's cool about this is if you don't know what is out there, as you're investigating, you are creating more
Mm,
options, and options are freedom. If you skip this step, if you descend into the problem, but you're like, this is the only thing I can see because you didn't investigate, then you think this is the only choice. But as soon as you are investigating multiple options, you talk with different people in those situations, eventually you can see, oh, this is a choice, and this is a choice, and this is a choice, and
yeah.
this is a choice. And eventually you can say, that's the one that I want. These are the people I want to associate with, and you can start going in that direction. When you swim in that
Mm,
direction, you just keep swimming in that direction, then you can start to associate with the people that you want to do the things.
mm,
And I think those types of choices, that type of freedom of choosing where you want to go, rather feeling like this is the only way that you have, that investigation step is essential. So thank you for bringing
oh,
that up. Hey, yeah,
100%.
looked
Of
like you had another.
course. Pardon?
Did you have another idea? Sorry, it looked like you were about to say something.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to add quickly is even when you're in the investigation portion of the dive, I can't tell you how many times I've come across something that even if it didn't work for me, it worked so well for someone else. And if they were in a similar even if they were in a similar situation, I'm like, well, this didn't work for me, but it could work for you. Like, who am I to say? Like, and that has worked for them. So it's a win-win. You get to help someone out too as you investigate further.
I love that. And when we investigate, we find multiple options. Just because that option doesn't work for us, like you said, doesn't mean it won't work for somebody else. But knowing
Mm,
all these different choices is part of this process. And when we come in with an open mind, an open heart, and we really are our eyes open so that we can see the new opportunities, things will happen in our business that we didn't even know were options before we went and explored. So this is this
mm,
next portion. It's a great little segue into visualize. Now, visualization in business, in destroying your self-limiting beliefs, all of this. Let's talk about the goggles that we put on that protect our eyesight while we're diving, while we're going into this. What does that even mean to visualize in business and to eliminate some of these self-limiting beliefs? Go ahead.
so I think when you visualize like what can you be, I think is like what do you see your future as?
Mm.
And I could go into that for a million hours. But I think it comes down to is when you visualize yourself and like where you're going, when you reprogram a certain aspect of maybe a self-limiting belief, you're one step closer to visualizing and making that visualization a reality and not just a concept in your head. And I think that's super important. I mean, your brain is so powerful. It's insane. The thing is, what's super interesting, one of my mentors years ago, she told me your brain processes the truth and a lie the same. So even if you're like, I can't do this, I can't do this, if you're telling yourself you can't do that, well, your brain is going to program itself to believe you can. Or if you're like, I can do this, I can do this. And you're just like, even if you have some regimen on if you don't believe, but if you tell yourself you can, well, your brain's going to process it as you can, and it's going to go final percent, and it's going to go that extra mile. and get that vision, make that visualization reality. And that's one thing that I really like to do in that regard, because I can myself will be like, I don't know if I can do this, but well, you know what? I can do this. And having that visualization for whatever it is, maybe you want to do 5 deals a year or 10 or whatever that number is for you. And visualizing that to make it a reality is just, I think, so powerful. And it's just a reminder of when you sometimes get stuck in the mud of it all. It's like remembering your why, I think, is so important. And visualizing, like, for example, when I was younger, it was getting my license. First thing I did when I got my license was go and see a sunset by the beach. That was my visualization. And like, even though it took 6 years, I can't tell you how much I love that. And it was worth it all in that moment to have the windows down and like was definitely listening to ABBA or something, but making that visualization was so important and incredible. And that's one thing I always like to come back to in business, limiting belief system.
I think this is so, so good. Now, one of the basic concepts here is how clear our vision is. And
Mm,
I'll pull up this one more time so you can see the goggles. I had an experience when I was scuba diving, not scuba diving, I was snorkeling in Hawaii. And I went to this guy's shop and he's like, just make sure you don't drop it in the sand. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's like, you don't drop your goggles in the sand. It's like, okay, cool, good to know. Um, guess what I did on accident? Dropped it in the sand. What happens is if you get any type of sand on the goggle, that little anti-fog
mm,
stuff gets wiped off when you're cleaning it. And you have a foggy goggle. So it's really hard to see cool fish if you have foggy goggles. And as you're breathing into it, you're
very true.
like take them off. And you're in the middle of the ocean. You're like, okay, now I can see this much and I can see this much, but you can't see everything. And it was an interesting experience because when you think about business, often we have foggy goggles. Often we have
Mm,
limited visibility. And what leadership does, what mentors do, what coaches do, is they help you get that little anti-fog spray and say, hey, I've been there. Here's how we fix this. It's not, you don't have to live with that forever. You can improve your sight. You can improve your visualization. They spray it on there, they wipe it off. And as soon as you put those goggles back on and you go under, you're like, oh, I had no idea it was so vast. There were so many options. I had no idea because I had this much that I could see.
mm,
Tiny little portion of the reality. But as soon as we defog our glasses or
mm,
we defog those goggles, suddenly we can see something that we couldn't see before. So how have
mm.
uh, coaches, how have mentors been able to help you defog your goggles?
Oh, that's a big question. 'Cause I have two really amazing coaches right now who have helped me through a lot over the past even 2 years.
Mhm.
Eileen Gallagher and Greg Kimball, absolutely amazing coaches. And the like you said, my goggles can get pretty foggy sometimes, and they'll be like, "Here, let me just clear that up for you," or they'll be like, and they'll be like, maybe we just need to take a step back and like let's revisualize this. And because they're like, I've been there. Maybe you don't need to spreadsheet everything. Like there was a point where I was banned from spreadsheets because that's how I made all of my decisions.
Wow.
And Elaine was like, let's just spreadsheet. Let's just like clear up the fog there. Because I only had one um it's a perception,
Yeah.
and I wasn't seeing the whole picture. And like she's really great with that. And then Greg is like, here, let's maybe just expand your business stuff here some more. And even before then, um growing up, my parents were real estate investors and also they had like 5 other businesses. So growing up in that aspect is I saw things pretty differently. I mean, I started my first business when I was 13. I don't like I was learning to code and whatnot. Not many people have that experience. But I also had an amazing experience being able to learn how to do flips from the ground up. And it you see things from a different perspective, being able to have coaches, mentors, um, which you get their insight, and it helps you grow too and take that visualization to another level, which is absolutely fantastic.
I love it. And what's cool is sometimes we don't even recognize that we can only see like this tiny little portion of the picture. We're like, I can see the whole thing. And then after you talk with the coach, they're like, okay, let me remove these. Now you can see.
Yeah, that's happened a few too many times.
It's happened many times with me too. And it's something that you don't even realize that you're being short-sighted and you don't have that openness to the next thing. So I'm so grateful for coaches. Highly recommend having good quality coaches in every aspect of your life. It's so helpful. Now, this last portion, guys, is something that I think sums up this idea of dive so well. It's to emerge. After you've gone
Mm,
through this, what do we do after we have experienced descending, investigating, visualizing? We've emerged. We have a new system or a new program that we have run. What do you do next? Because it's really easy to be like, yeah, I'll just go back to my old thing. And you get all of that work just washed away. I had this experience with a lot of workout programs. Do the 12-week thing, lose some weight. I'm like, man, I'm doing so good. And then at the end of that, I was like, whew, glad I'm done with that. And I emerged and I failed within the next week because I didn't take that programming and download it all the way. So let's talk
mm.
how we emerge and how we make sure that programming is fantastic and stays part of our life.
I I think some questions I like to ask myself is like, because when you do deep work, sometimes you need like more self-care and things like that to make sure you're re-energized or you get burnt out.
Mhm.
I find. So what boundaries do you have in place? Do you have a self-care checklist? Even
Mm.
if it's as simple as going for a walk, um, like just getting like a 15-minute brisk walk, that is a game changer. Or maybe you just need a good call with a good friend, something like that. Things like that can really do in the long term so much. And when it comes to boundaries with like your limiting belief systems, it to make sure you don't retract.
Mm.
Like what are maybe I think like good questions to ask yourself is like, what are some things that in the past I would fall back to and patterns that were continuous in my life, and how can I stop that from moving forward as I emerge into this life that I am building for myself. So if it's maybe not going out past 10 o'clock or whatever, one of mine, or something like that, like if that's something you need, then good for you. Like you're building towards your best life. So go for it. And I think that's something I think is very prudent when emerging from the dive.
I love this. Okay, so this reminded me of Indiana Jones for some reason. You remember that moment when you have that gold thing that he has to go and swap oh, what was it? It was like a little crystal. And he's like, oh my, all right, I have to take this bag of sand and swap it. Anyway, just this idea that whenever you take something that's new
Mm,
and you're like, this is a new thing that I want to put into my life, we have to
hmm
bad thing with something good. Because if you
mm,
don't swap out those habits, we leave a void. And what happens with
mm,
voids, what happens when we are not uh, programmed enough to be like, oh, I'm going to put the good thing that I want in there is all men are kind of, I want to say the natural man is an enemy to God. You think about it, a lot of our natural tendencies are, I'm going to do the easy thing. I'm going to
Yeah.
uh, eat unhealthy, or I'm going to binge watch TV, or whatever those patterns that you're doing your best to eliminate are. They will fit back into your schedule. They'll fit back into your time
Yeah.
unless you are intentional with saying, I'm going to take this part of my life that I want and replace it with that thing that I don't want, and doing it in a strategic way, right? Right at the end of that dive, right? Okay, I went through, I recognized this was an option for me. I don't have to have X, Y, or Z in my life. I can do this. You emerge with a new skill set, a new habit, a new talent, if you will. And then that programming will allow you to function in a higher, more efficient way. But what happens?
100%.
I have a question for you. What happens when you've been doing this for a little while and then that old habit creeps back in? What have you done? I don't know if you've ever had this happen. Surely never have you ever backslid into doing.
Never.
That's not, I mean, purely hypothetical.
I oh, I could give so many examples. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to it's like, well, reminding myself is, well, remembering the state I was in before and like making that choice and choosing, making that decision. Do I want to live in this constant state? And once again, going through the investigation and the visualization, because if I backslid before, what are some other ways to stop me from once again backsliding, and investigate that further and emerging from it? Accountability.
Yeah,
Like the people, once you get to like have so many people who will keep me accountable for certain things, which is fantastic and helps me from backsliding, because I can't tell you how many times we all backslide. We're human. But to make sure, I want you have those accountability people in your life, and accountability and that intention are, I feel like, that game changer too when it comes to the emergence.
absolutely. And when we're being dumb, we need people to recognize that are around us that love us and will give us constructive feedback. You're like, hey, you need a checkup from the neck up. And we sometimes will take that and be like, okay, thank you. Oh, let me pull that out. Okay, I will now fix that. Thank you for the criticism. That's so good. But I love this idea of surrounding yourself with the people that are living the programming that you want. They're living the life
Mm,
you want. Maybe that community is living at a level of thought and a system of thought that allows you to be a little bit better than you were before, allows you to see a little bit farther than you did before, and know that there are more options. You're not pigeonholed. You're like, oh, because of my background, I can't X, Y, or Z. If you've ever said that to yourself, read some books, open yourself up to new mentorship, to new coaches, and actually discover what is possible, because wherever you started is irrelevant. It's where you're going. Your past doesn't dictate
100%.
what you're going to become in the future, but you can choose that as your programming, or you could not, or you could choose to dive a little deeper. I got to dive a little deeper. No, it's good. That's not the real lyric, but that just came to my head. So tell us, if you could give yourself advice from 10 years ago, like, hey, younger Annalise, if you do this one thing, everything will be fine. Everything will change. What would you give yourself as advice?
Actually, this is something I maybe became aware of a year and a half ago, but it was the words I say to myself.
Mm.
I have I'm not always the best with it, so I think if anything were to majorly change, um, what an advice I'd give to my 18-year-old self was watch how you talk to yourself, because we can be the biggest critics of ourselves, and actually that's something that has popped up too from multiple coaches.
Mm.
So I'm like, maybe that's an area we need to explore a little more and dive into. Um, but because like once again, it goes back to the programming of your brain, and how you what do you call it? recognize a truth and a lie, this your brain processes the same.
Yeah.
So even if I say to myself, "Oh, I'm terrible at this," and if someone else thinks like, and it could be the opposite, well, I'm gonna process it as I'm terrible at it. And I found that was something that has held me back a lot in certain areas is just simply how I talk to myself. So that's something I've had to change a lot.
I think that's amazing advice. I've struggled with that multiple times. Sometimes you
Mm,
get in the mud, if you will. You're like, oh, I am X, Y, or Z. And you give yourself negative tags or negative names. And what's really, really nice is you can say, oh man, that programming that just came through, there's an error code that's shooting up, and you're like, delete that because that is not correct, right? Anytime you have a little bug that pops in, you're like, ah, that's a pop-up window. I don't like that. Boop, and it goes away. We can totally think about some of these things, but if that is not who we are being, we might need to do a little system update, and then
100%.
we can recognize that's not true. That may have been true of me 5 or 10 years ago, but not today and not in the future. So we're going to delete that program,
Mm.
delete that code, and then open up to new opportunities. I love this idea. Thank you so much for sharing this idea of having a lie and a truth being processed the same way. It's kind of like a Google search, guys. If you search one thing, you have confirmation bias because your brain is going to go into into the recesses and kind of like a file cabinet. Oh, yes, here's all the different reasons why that's true, or here's all the different reasons why that's not. And you can start to justify. But when we have a coach, when we have mentors that have been there, they're a little farther down the road. That doesn't mean they're better. That just means that they're farther down the road. They can say, hey, you probably should delete that file right there. It's not serving you. And you're like,
100%.
well, that is something I could delete. And you're like, yeah, let's delete that one and start filling it with better things. So if you could help us understand how you've been able uh, to overcome these in business, specifically in real estate, because I know that's your expertise. What was one self-limiting belief you had before that you were able to squash with this idea? And then we'll wrap it up.
I think probably my first flip. Uh there was a lot of limiting belief systems. I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to do this. I was getting quotes and I was 18 at the time. And I was just comparing myself to people who were like 10 years down the road. And it was and honestly, was just putting myself down so much during that process. That's something that really sticks out. But at the end of the day, I ended up doing pretty good on that flip. And even though I was tearing myself apart, I kept telling myself that I can't do this. Like, you're not worthy of the success of it. But at the end of the day, like if I were to apply those principles, um, there would have been a different outcome. I'm 100%. So that was definitely one.
I think applying those principles and saying, what if I could do it? Maybe I can't do it
Exactly.
yet.
Mm,
I'm going to find someone that has done it. I'm going to ask them, or I'm going to look at all the different options and figure out with my limited understanding what I think is best, and then bring that choice to somebody else. Did you ever have a mentor on that first flip, or did you do it 100% by yourself? You swung the hammer, you did the painting.
um, so I had some help. I got some guidance from my dad and my opa, but most of it I did most of it myself. I managed all of the project. I ripped up carpets, got into the mud of it all.
Nice. And then you learn,
So,
you're like, oh, do I want to go and rip up all the carpets by myself again? How many times did
oh,
you
I still do that to this day.
still do it? Because you enjoy it. Okay. All right. I guess that's fair. It is kind of exciting to rip it up and then pull out all the little little staples and stuff.
Before and afters are so satisfying.
Yes, that's fair. So you got to get into the grit a little bit. I think that's fun.
Mm,
So to wrap things up, is there one final call to action? Hey, do this, or if you could say one idea boiled down, if they could do one thing, what would it be? What little nugget of wisdom or advice would you give to someone that's just starting out to help actually utilize this dive principle?
Mm, association, I think, is one that comes down to,
Mm.
like, if you're struggling in real estate, go to a real estate meetup, get in the room, um, start um, you're one conversation away from changing your life, as Greg Kimball always says. And that is one principle that, and one fact that I personally absolutely love. And it's so true in any regard.
I love
So,
it. Annalise, we met on the side of a pool during regionals 2 years ago, and we were one conversation, and it changed the trajectory of both of our lives because now we're friends. And you think about
yeah,
the mentors that we have, if we don't open our mouth and actually have a conversation, what are we leaving? I'm so glad that we're friends. So glad that we had this opportunity to talk today and share some of your experience.
same.
Thank you so much. And guys, if you enjoyed this, where do we find you online? How can people keep following your awesome trajectory and your story?
You can find me at annalise.cat or annalise.keck on Instagram, or life by my dot design.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you on today. And once again, guys, hit that like, that subscribe button, hit the little bell notification because we want to make sure you get all the best leveling up information possible. God bless.